which happens, that it has to be translatable. I had an amazing experience. I talked the $1 Million Club is one of the brass rings for speakers. It's the top insurance, the top financial folks in the world. I keynoted. I've been on main stage twice now, and this last time when I was there last year, it's converted into like 10 different languages. So you do your speech, and then it's translated to 10 different languages. And it was so funny that I'm sitting up there, I finished with the story, and the English speakers laugh, and then the French over here laugh, and then the Germans over here, and the Chinese, and then people realized what was happening, and it starts laughing again. It's like the laugh heard round the world. And I stood up there. It was one of the coolest experiences watching this happen. And then it all started up again. It was really, really something else.
Well, and that's in itself an art, being able to do the joke, pause, stay with the emotion of the humor and the laugh, and then go on to another joke, pause for translation. How long did it take you to get used to doing that?
I did practice that. I mean, you have to go as if it's in real time, even though the laughter doesn't always match. And you have to give people time to laugh before you move on. And so I would say it's something I did practice at. I think the biggest thing with that is sticking with commonalities. Like a cubicle in the US is a cubicle in China, is a cubicle in Germany. You know, a cubicle is a cubicle. You stick with those terms. But when they're converted, the reason I stay away from jokes, actually, I do more stories than jokes, because jokes almost always put somebody down. My humor has to enhance and never diminish anybody. But a joke, if I translate a joke, you have your setup line, your punch line, and your punch word. If you convert it from English to, say, Spanish, it changes the syntax and their order in there. And so you can't really translate them all the time. So it's a big thing about learning what translates, what doesn't, changing different material to fit different groups. Some things I don't think they really don't understand. Like this, one of my business cards, it's a picture of my pride and joy. Now that's probably very recognizable. That was Henny Youngsman's original business card, but it's not a common term in every country. Whereas my other business card is a picture of my kids, 2 baby billy goats, or kids, that translated just fine. And then my business card is on the back of it. It encourages people to keep my card and helps make me more memorable.
I've heard Jeff Dunham talk about this because he travels the globe, and Jeff has the puppets. And certain puppets are probably not the right puppet to pull out on stage in certain contexts. And he had to rewrite some material very carefully to not get in trouble with Ahmed. And do you have to really think about that? Do you have to make sure you're not going to culturally offend them or do something that's off? How hard is that to rewrite your stuff?
Terms, I mean, I almost always, there's a lot of great material out there. There's a book called When to Bow, Shake Hands, or whatever. There's some great books, but I'll contact the speakers who have already spoken in a certain area. Like the first time I spoke in London, I spoke to some of our peers over there and asked them what doesn't work, what works, as well as are there terms I should stay away from? And they did. They gave me a couple terms, but every once in a while, Rich, you still make a mistake. I tell a story whenever I get on an airplane. Instead of ordering water or soda or something like everybody else, I'll order Tang. So the flight attendant will come over and ask me, what do you want? And I'll say, do you have Tang? And usually they'll stop and laugh, and it's worth a laugh. Well, I did that in London the first time, and the only person laughing was the other American in the audience at the time. They don't have a real big astronaut to the moon program like we did, where Tang was very popular. And very important lesson that you've got to make sure that your material is translatable, no matter where it is.
So that takes me to another question: is why don't keynote speakers bring more humor into their bits? And when they do go international, why don't they promote themselves as having the humor and having the good talk?
You know, different countries have different feelings on that. I mean, training in Singapore, in Japan, and other countries, a lot of times they're really big on the content. The humor can be there and should be there. It's just not promoted as much. Also, people are afraid to use humor because they've had bad experiences. They don't take the time to learn. And I mean, I've spent a lot of time learning what not to do so that I'm funny and not stupid.
So what are some of those secrets of the trade? Just give us a couple here. What are some of the things that we should not do on stage?
Well, I mean, some of the things that we talk about, like Tang, what I did was I took my program and sent it over to a friend. First time I spoke in Australia, I sent my program to a friend there, had him watch it just to see if there were anything in there that probably wouldn't translate well. Even though they speak English, there's still different slang. Yeah. And it was really interesting, the things that didn't work. For instance, we might tease about the name of a city like Walla Walla, Washington, or Poughkeepsie or something like that. In Australia, they may have the name of a city maybe 14 syllables long, and so they're not that strange, and they wouldn't find that funny at all. So you have to be able to do your homework and research it, and even then, sometimes you make mistakes. I mean, I know my material's all clean, but I was in Australia one time, followed a guy who talks about rooting for your team, and they didn't respond the way he wanted. And finally, and I didn't know how to tell him that that's slang for having sex, that's probably not something you want to be asking people. And finally they burst out laughing, and it's like, yeah, mate, we root, so it didn't have a bad ending, but he didn't know. He just took it for granted. It all means the same. It just doesn't work internationally. So
no, and you have to do your research. Yeah, I mean, you have to prepare a little bit more than a stateside thing. How much does it help you? Oh, sorry, go.
No, I was going to say, our audiences are becoming more and more international. Yes. A lot of times now at conferences, they'll be streaming to 2 or 3 different countries, or in the audience themselves, there are people from all over the world that have come there as a part of a company that moves their people from country to country. So I've gotten a lot more attuned to it just to make sure that I connect with more and more of my audience.
So do you read the audience? Do you kind of assume a little bit when you glance out behind the curtain and you see a bunch of Asian people, you see a bunch of Hispanic? Are you able to play to that audience a little bit more because you're ready for it?
Well, more than anything, I try to take things out that aren't common terminologies, or that may be just American slang. It's like I was in Beaumont, Texas, and one of the gentlemen ahead of me made the comment. He said that he was out of pocket the rest of the day. And I could tell that the audience, that's a term that may be used there. He also talked about the borrow pit, or the ditch alongside the road. Yeah. A lot of the audience from different countries had no idea what he was talking about at all. So, I mean, common phrases, things like that, a lot of it is awareness, and you just kind of slowly weed them out, I think. I really try to stick with things that are universal, or that, almost anybody would understand.
Well, and some iconic symbols cross over, like Mickey Mouse is known around the world, right? You can use that anywhere. Darth Vader is known pretty much around the world now. Right. So there are things you can just keep in and be safe and be iconic about it, right?
Oh, really? I mean, I was in Johannesburg, South Africa. As we were driving back from the airport, there's a guy with a Darth Vader shirt. Wherever you go, movies have really created a commonality for a lot of different things like that. And no, in a lot of ways, it is a very small world.
So we go get clients, we go look for people to hire us, but why should they hire you over other speakers? How do you typically respond to that?
I had a client call me up one time, and he said, Tim, it's between you and this other fella. It was a person I knew really well. Why should we hire you instead of this other speaker? Like, I'm going to trash talk him. And I said, well, I will tell you this. I said, I had my appendix taken out 20 years ago. He still has his. And it's just one more thing that could go wrong at your event. And it made the meeting planner laugh, and I got the gig. But, for me, I get hired a lot as an opening keynote to get people laughing, open their minds up to the rest of the event, or as a closer that when they leave, they can't wait to come back the next year, right, that they get fired up to leave. And a lot of what I talk about are things that can help with their corporate culture in dealing with stress. Like, very simple thing. I tell them little stressors happen. You put your hand here, you go bummer, and you do this. You let it go. And sometimes you just do it in your mind. I mean, if the president of the company walks in your office, you don't want to be going bummer, but you also do this. You woohoo, that you celebrate little wins as they happen. And it's amazing. I'll get emails, calls from people, even years later, where they'll say, Tim, we're still doing the bummer woohoo to find a balance. You choose how you perceive the stress a lot of the times.
How did you stumble on this? How did you stumble on to the business and the humor angle? Because to some people, business is serious. And if anything tragic happens, you definitely don't laugh at it. But how did you fall into this?
Yeah, there's a time and a place for everything. I was working for the federal government. I used to work for the federal food stamp program. And the higher that I got up, I was being loaned to different agencies. Like we talk about the program, a show the flag. And I got to be known as the funny Fed, which is sometimes an oxymoron, and started realizing there was an industry out there. But what I did was I talked about the things that worked for me. As I watched people burn out around me in these high stress jobs, the things that I would do to deal with stress, other people want to know about. At the end of the day, instead of dragging your work home, you do your dismount, and leave work at work, and then the next day you leave home at home. Little things like that, I think sometimes we take for granted, or I did, that everybody does them, but they didn't. And
well, as a former gymnast, I got the dismount. I totally get that. When you first got into the humor side to the business, was it a hard nut to crack?
Really hard. Really hard. I've only done stand-up comedy one time. Stand-up is a very different animal than what speakers do. Stand-up comedians that are in a comedy show or something, that's laugh, 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 laugh. And a lot of it can be derogatory or even negative. And I had people that, they'd say, we don't want to bring in a nightclub type act. And I'd have to explain to them that, I've never done stand-up. In fact, the only time I did stand-up, Rich, was I was in Las Vegas, and one of the folks at one of the shows challenged me to get up and be clean and be just as funny. And I had to prove that I could do that.
Wow.
And my friend Darren McCroy made that happen for me. And so I only did it one time, but it was to prove you can be just as funny clean. It doesn't have to be dirty. All of my material is upbeat, clean.
Well, and there's another side to the comedy act of that, so to speak, because you probably bring real life stories, things we can relate to. Sometimes there's a reach. Sometimes they're trying to stretch it. But the best laugh, I think, are the ones that are the most authentic, right?
Yeah, it really is. It's that I try to show them the same situations that they've run into, only how I encountered it and what I did about it. The loud talkers at the airport talking on their cell phones, or, it's about finding things that stress people out that are universal. One of my famous stories is the big sweaty guy in the middle seat, where, we talk about not wanting that. And then one day I realized it was me. And so it's being able to laugh at ourselves.
Yes.
C.W. Metcalf said, laugh not with ridicule, but with objectivity and acceptance of self. I think it's really important.
Now, have you ever been heckled from one of your business audiences and be like, get off the stage, come on, guy?
I've never been openly heckled, but see, I would even handle that differently than a stand-up comic. A stand-up comic could go right for the throat. I've watched them do that. With me, I had an event one time that I did that the meeting planner hadn't really informed everybody of what was going on, and they literally made people leave their offices to come down to this room for the training, and some of them didn't want to be there. And there's a guy sitting in the front row reading a newspaper, and so I went behind him, and I'm reading like, Olson's cow got out again, and then I walked to the other side of the stage and let his boss take care of him. I think if it ever happened where we're heckled as speakers, the last thing you want to do is attack that person, because the whole audience would be against you then.
Yeah.
It's more that let them keep going until one of the managers is bound to step in and take care of it.
So you did say this was a tough nut to crack. What was the biggest hurdles looking back on how you started it?
I think that getting known, when people are spending money for an event and a speaker, they want somebody they know can hit a home run.
Yeah.
And so as I was coming up, as I was learning the craft and working my way up, it was difficult to get in because I didn't have a best-selling book, which a lot of speakers will use as their best credential. I've booked since then, but I didn't have those standard things, and it just took me a little bit longer to learn the business of speaking, and I concentrated a lot on the craft. I mean, I studied ex vaudeville. I studied silent humor. I mean, when COVID hit, I was looking at how radio was funny because they couldn't be seen, but they're incredibly funny about how to use the things I learned from that to help the virtual audiences enjoy the moment. So I think it's a constant state of learning. It's not like I got it and I can now coast, because the only time you coast is when you're going downhill and there's no resistance. I'm always working to get better.
You touch on COVID and learning the craft. How difficult was COVID?
COVID was really, really, really hard for me. I didn't realize how addicted to the stage I was. Wow. I would take one of my cats in, and I'm performing for the staff, doing gags for them. And it drove my wife crazy. My wife has a business office at home too. And it was interesting to understand that that's something to be aware of, that any speaker should be aware of is, are we doing this as a business, or are we addicted to the stage and the laughter and the applause? It was a real eye opener for me.
So let me go a little bit further with that, because you touched on it, but the business of speaking, I've been there myself, but we want the stage, but we don't understand the business. What would you say about that? How can you help out those aspiring speakers?
Yeah, I think it's finding the people that talk about the business of speaking. Mark LeBlanc in Minneapolis, smallbusinesssuccess.com is who I learned a lot of the business of speaking from. He's got a black belt in it. And I think what happens is speakers come into this, and it may be that suddenly they're getting a check for $5,000 or $10,000, and they think, sweet, I can do anything I want. They don't realize how much you need to save, and how you need to do your taxes, and how important it is to set the money aside. The business is incredibly important. How many you can do without burning out, how we never schedule them back to back anymore. You've got to know that the airlines may not get you there the next day. You've got to give time to make sure that you're going to be there. I mean, I tell my customers I'll do anything short of committing a felony to be there on time. But the business of speaking, the business about marketing, about making sure our demo videos are quality and our websites are up to speed. The time to build your website is the minute you're done with your website. The time you're done with your demo is the minute you're done with your demo. That's just the way it goes. That's business.
One of the other areas I don't think we talk about, I think it's assumed, but usually it's 2 or 3 speakers at a conference, something like that. You have the line, you're going behind Tim Gard. How do you best prepare to go behind somebody?
I don't have a lot, and I say this in all humility, I don't have a lot of people like to follow me on an agenda, but I give stuff away, and it's very interactive, but I'll find out who I'm following, and I want to make sure that I also give them recognition.
Yes.
And it's one of the quickest way to establish rapport is if the speaker ahead of you was well received, then I think you touch on what they talked about, and it helps bridge that acceptance level. So, I mean, knowing who's going to be on ahead of you, using your own material, I'm a big believer in the fact, I don't know if you knew this. Speakers tell the starfish story about the guy walking along the beach, picking up starfish, throwing them back, and saying it matters to this one. I have gone so far as to have an 11-foot starfish costume made, where I got up and told the story as as through the eyes of the starfish, is to encourage people to do your own material. Don't do shareware. Don't take stories you heard about the lighthouse and the ship and the eagle and the chicken, and tell your own stories and do them well. You do them so well, nobody can copy you.
Well, and
that's some of the best advice.
That goes back to a humorist I heard years ago. He said, if you're going to do physical humor, you go all in. There's no halfway with physical humor, right?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. My face, I mean, I was introducing a Hall of Fame speaker, and I only had 2 lines. One of my friends, Manny, was introducing him. Almost my entire part of it was my face reacting to what Manny said. And it was designed that way. So the audience is watching me. There's so much we can do with our face. And I mean, all of it matters. It's like, I don't wear comedy clothes. I wear a suit like a businessman. I'm a business traveler. It's called contrasting styles, and it helps the audience picture that. It's just important that we be fully committed. That, I think Lou Heckler's the one that said that we need to be in the now, in the present term, and not even partially there. Because, I mean, again, Lou said, we don't tell and retell, we live and relive. And when you do that, you're present.
So I'm going to put a pin in that for a minute, because I've met so many speakers. They do it over and over. They hit another plane. They do it over, and they're just doing a bit now. Being in the moment, reading the room, making that subtle shift, staying a little bit longer online is so important to be a top caliber speaker, isn't it?
Right. I mean, sometimes it's little things. You see the chicken feet sticking out of my suitcase. I have chicken feet sticking out of my suitcase. Part of the story is I take it out and I frisk it. And while I'm frisking the chicken at TSA, showing them what TSA did, my friend Mark Scherenbrock saw me do that one time, and he said, Tim, wait till the audience is a little uncomfortable and then give it 2 more beats. And I did. And the effect was tremendous. Sometimes it's that level of commitment that really makes a difference between a professional and an amateur.
Now, you've been over 3,000 different main stages worldwide. I really want to stress that, worldwide. That's very impressive, but what's 1 or 2 things you could share about maybe something that's really stood out to you, made an impact, or whatever?
I think, again, MDRT and the laughter that just echoed around the room, that 10,000 people, I mean, that was probably one of the highlights of my life. And I'll tell you another one that I thought was really important. I wrote this little book. It's just called Just Plain Funny, PLANE. And when we came out with it, I was sitting on a plane one day and looked over into the window seat, and there was a lady reading my book. And it was a real strong moment for me. She didn't know me. She picked the book because she thought it'd be funny, and she was laughing. She's over there reading it, laughing. And I offered to sign it, and she goes, "Why would you sign it?" Thinking, she didn't put it together. It wasn't until we got up that I think she realized what it was. But little things like that, those moments really stick with us. I'll tell you one more, Rich. I had a guy come up to me at the end of a program one time. I'd done like 2 hours. And he watched me pack all my props and all my stuff up, and came over and he said, Tim, he said, I have pancreatic cancer, and I read that humor may help me live longer. And he said, I think you may have given me a couple extra hours. Didn't tell me his name, didn't say anything else, just walked off. And I had to sit there for about half an hour thinking about that. It really, really impacted me at the time. I mean, those moments I hope speakers take and they hold forever. You always remember them. That's why we do it.
I was told at an early age in my career, write down those moments. I don't care if it's a napkin or whatever, and then you translate it back over, because you're going to have highs and lows. You're not always going to hit the home run. You have no phone calls. I was told to keep those in a Monday morning file, pull them back out, and remember the joy to keep you going long term. Do you have one of those?
I do. I do a program every year at Pepperdine University for the incoming. There's a leadership group of students from all over California that will be going there the next year. And at the end of it, and I donate my time. I fly down there on my own dime. I'm not paid for it, but I've done it every year. And the kids in the audience write me letters, and I usually get 9 or 10 of them every year. And I carry them around with me when I travel, and I read them. And there, one young girl talked about, I talked about being a humor bully, and she felt that she didn't realize, she thought she didn't know she was hurting people as much as she did, and how,
Wow.
what a difference it made. And I mean, some of the things like that I think, those are the things I carry around with me. But you're right. You have to keep track of it, because it can be a lonely business. It can be a hard business. It can be a really stressful business. And I've slept on floors at airports. I have, I've done all those things. We need to remind ourselves why we do this.
Yes.
And those letters, those comments, I think they really help.
Now, let me turn the corner here, because you did just talk about your love of helping people and these gut-wrenching stories. You also have a charity you're involved with. It's called Win-Win Charity.
Win-Win
There's an
Charity.
upcoming telethon coming up on December 2nd. Tell us about this. It sounds amazing.
So Win-Win Charities, Jeff Savilico. You can look up jeffsavilico.com. Las Vegas entertainer that became a speaker. Just a really good person who now has a charity, Win-Win Charities, that's designed to help kids in hospitals all over the United States. He's aligned with several other charities, but basically it involves even things like, he had me going room to room in Orlando, hospital to hospital, entertaining children who are in hospital for a long time, entertaining them one at a time. And it was incredibly impactful to me. They're doing their fundraiser on December 2nd in Las Vegas. And I'll make sure that you get a link for that you can put on your site. But I really recommend it. It's really been an outstanding experience for those involved, but he really does some good work there. He does Humor Without Borders. He's something else, Jeff Savilico.
What's your reason for doing it? Why do you want to help him succeed with his cause?
I've been asked a lot to be involved with different charities. This is one of the ones where I saw where this person, Jeff, was so committed. Speakers' free time is something we jealously guard. And when I was with him in Orlando and we were doing this, he was more concerned he wasn't going to be able to make it to one of the other hospitals, that he wouldn't have time. That's the level of commitment. It really touched me that he would be so involved with that. He's Win-Win Charities, really positive organization, I think.
Well, and giving back is something I feel very important about. And NSA has been a part of those give backs. You've been a part of those give back. It's something that I believe we should be bringing cheer, joy. And for kids in the hospital, there's nothing better than having a comic come in and crack them jokes and shake hands and have a good time, right?
Or not. I did one room and the kid looked at me and he goes, I didn't think that was really funny. And I said, well, I did. I said, I'm glad one of us had a good time. And, I think they're going through a lot of stressful things, but tough audience, but I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Win-Win Charity. We'll have the notes in the description. Please check it out and be a part of that. And, you mentioned your website. We do want to go there. We do want to have people check you out. So what are they going to find when they go there?
TimGard.com. You'll find some of my videos. I think we've got a lot of them on Vimeo, on YouTube. It's called the Woohoo channel on YouTube. I've got quite a few videos out there. Sometimes if you just need a laugh, there's all kinds of short videos on there that are designed just to be able to poke fun at some of the really serious stressors out there. And I encourage you to go check them out.
Go check out Tim Gard and, some of the videos. Now, you mentioned videos, and this is one of those areas that I have a little thing to pick with my fellow speakers. And you use videos highly effective. A lot of videos or a lot of speakers are still wrestling with, I'm a keynote speaker on stage. I don't need this video stuff. What would you say to those that are not embracing the video age of what we do?
Well, people have shorter and shorter attention spans, and I don't mean that derogatorily. That's TikTok. That's all the things that are influencing how long we give our attention to something. And I think the videos allow us to touch people's lives or to impact on people with some of those shorter formats. Sometimes it's just the entertainment. I've had people call me up and just say, Tim, I watched it, and he said, I didn't even know you had a message. They're just funny as heck. So I'll take that too. That's fine.
Well, and it's also a way to keep the ball rolling. When you don't have the gigs, it's keeping the engine going and letting people know you're out there. I think is one of those things we talked about earlier. We need to keep the ball rolling for ourselves, don't we?
Well, and there's so many programs now available to speakers that can help you in this process. There are a lot of AI programs where we don't have to spend a lot of money on editing, or you don't have to learn a bunch of software, that you can take bits and pieces in there. And really, it's some of our social proof that we are, in fact, out there speaking. I think it's really important.
So where are you heading next? Where's your next couple of drop off on the trip around the earth?
Well, believe it or not, I'm going to Brainerd, Minnesota next. That's my next
stopping ground, Minnesota.
I'll be going there. I was just in Bali. I was at the Global Speakers Federation in Bali and was only able to be there for 24 hours. I'd promised to do the closing event, had an event come up that I had to do. So I literally flew to Bali, spoke, and came back home. And so, it's the world. I mean, we can get anywhere. I enjoy the travel. I enjoy the road. I enjoy the journey. And so whether I'm on a plane or in Brainerd or wherever I happen to be, I'll take those extremes. As long as I'm having fun on stage, I'll keep going.
Tim Gard, renowned speaker, world renowned, and also humorous. Thanks for being with us on Rock the Stage tonight.
Thanks for having me, everybody. Great time.
Tim Gard, you're going to want to check him out, learn more about him. He is everywhere. And like he said, he is also giving back in a very powerful way. He's a CSP, a CPAE, and he's touring the world, bringing joy, laugh, and a lot of practical teaching for the business world. And that's going to do it for our edition of Rock the Stage Show. Come back next week. We have amazing actors, directors, film directors, speakers, some of the best from around the world right here on Rock the Stage, Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You want to join us on our live chat? Join us on Sunday nights in the YouTube channel, and you can ask questions, participate, and be a part of the open crowd, or on PPN, where we're traveling the world in 17 different countries now. Rock the Stage is seen every week on PPN, the Public Place Network. That's it for this week. We'll be back here 7 o'clock next week for Rock the Stage Show.